Genesis 1:1, New American Standard. Stage 1 of creation is perfect. It's a recent and not a ruined or chaotic one. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's all we have to work with. There are no special qualifications for something else like a pre-Adam race or a disastrous beginning than a correction. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. More to come, details of which follow. In the beginning, bereshith, the beginning of time, space, matter. Out of nothing, right? Then time, space, and matter. Is there something that happened before this? Why would you think so? No specific indicator that that would be the case. So in the absence of using that imaginative thing, because nothing is stipulated, we got to go with what we have. Objectors falsely claim that bereshith should be interpreted in the beginning of God's creating, or when God began to create, thus attempting to force the false concept that the universe is much older than it is. Genesis 1:1-2 would then be falsely changed to say, in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth became ruined and chaotic, thus allowing for a period of time for evolution. This is a grammatical possibility, but not a contextual one, since there is no statement that comes before the verse 1, or any statement which qualifies it. We just have to take it at face value because that's the way we read. So verses 1 and 2 stand alone as a declarative statement about the absolute beginning of all time, space, matter, i.e. of the universe. Furthermore, the conjunction and, which connects verses 1 and 2, indicates uninterrupted sequential action. Certainly one which is not divided by millions of years. What do? You just have between the and the next word, we have millions of years. How would you know? How would the average reader say, well, yeah, I know this? And people say that because their pastor or their guru or whatever reads between the lines. But they're between the lines, you know what between the lines is? Nothing. There's nothing there. Neither can verse 1 be considered as a summation, as a completed series of creative acts, which then had to be recreated, i.e. fixed, if you will. I mean, you can put anything there. There's a chasm of nothing there, though. For Genesis 2:1 is a declarative statement indicating that from verse 1:1 to 2:1, there were 6 days which transpired in God's creative work. Listen. 1:31 to 2:1. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. Wait a minute, some of it wasn't. How do you read that? So the evening and the morning were the 6th day. By the way, what is a 24-hour day? It has an evening and a morning. Now there are other words, other meanings of the word day, but no meaning of the word day that has an evening and a morning in it can be anything but a 24-hour day. You have a 24 million year day, evening, 24 million eve morning, a year morning. No. How would anybody know this? I don't. If you can recall one instance which indicates the word day in whatever language is that has an evening and a morning and an ordinal adjective, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, okay, and 7th, is anything more than a simple 24-hour day. And the evenings and the mornings varied according to the season. In any case, 1:31, then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So there was nothing before that that had to be restored. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the hosts of them are finished in perfect tense. And take a look at Hebrews 4:3b to 4. Although the works were finished from the foundation of the world, for he, God, had spoken in a certain place on the seventh day in this way, and God rested on the seventh day from all his works. The seventh day. So, sounds like we have 6 days, and then the seventh day God rested. 6 24-hour days, and the seventh day he rested from doing that work. And what about the restoration? There's no restoration there that you could draw from. In any case, nor can 2 Peter 3:3-8, which follows, be forced to indicate that the days referred to in the creation account be more than 24-hour days. This is true because 2 Peter 3:8 simply states that God's viewpoint is timeless, especially relative to the coming time of his judgment of mankind's evil in spite of the thousands of years that have passed by. Read 2 Peter 3:3-8. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, and all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation, for this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were made, so I can read that, were of old, and the earth standing out of water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. But, beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. Remember, the communication is by the inspiration of God through the hands of men who wrote these scriptures, that we, men, not God, God understands himself, we would understand, being men, being finite and restricted in the time, a day is a 24-hour period of time. You see? So we are understanding that, how it's communicated to us in our understanding of language, context, and logic, in whatever language we have or language is. So, when a verse says in Genesis 1, talk about a 24-hour day, so well, we didn't really mean that. These days, which have an evening and a morning, are billions or millions or thousands of years in duration. Well, how would you know that? God communicated this in the context of Genesis. He didn't say, well, let's look at what Peter's going to write thousands of years later and recommunicate Genesis 1 in what Peter would say. We're talking about a characteristic of God that he's beyond time. But Genesis is the characteristic of man who is restricted by time. Besides that, where are the indications that these days are how many thousands of years? Because the evolutionists have different periods of time for what they think is their evolutionary, I wouldn't call it theory, they call it theory, but it isn't, because it's not scientific. It's not observable, repeatable, and falsifiable. In any case, so much for that. So Genesis 1:1, New American Standard Bible. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Theological Word Book of the Old Testament Dictionary. In the beginning, in Hebrew, bereshith, and the English transliteration of English using English letters. The most important use of bereshith in the Old Testament occurs in Genesis 1:1, where it is combined with the proclitic connecting preposition be equals in. Many commentators, both ancient and modern, have tried to read the phrase as when rather than in the beginning, as do several modern versions. And this is to promote the false doctrine of a million-year-old earth. The chief modern justification for this interpretation of the root word beginning is to relate it to the phrase Enuma Elish, which begins the Babylonian epic of the creation. But the problem is, even though the Babylonian epic came in time, evidently it appeared before the Old Testament Bible, there is no evidence to connect the two different terms, the one in Hebrew and the other in Babylonian. One is neither right nor wrong because of where they appeared. The proper interpretation of bereshith can be deduced from the other occurrences of this phrase and the witness of all ancient versions. The New Testament, John 1:1, translates the Hebrew and follows the Septuagint. Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, precisely in its meaning of Genesis 1:1, the first phrase of the Old Testament. The use of this root word, beginning, leaves no doubt that Genesis 1:1 opens with the very first and initial act of the creation of the cosmos. Henry Morris. So, the Genesis record. Henry Morris writes a really good book on this. Genesis 2:1 notes the termination of the work of the 6 days of creation by the following summary. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. This statement clearly refers to the work of the previous 6 days, including the first day. However, it includes the heavens in this summary. Interesting. And the only mention of the heavens during the 6 days is in Genesis 1:1, a fact which demonstrates that the summary of Genesis 2:1 embraces also the work of Genesis 1:1. In other words, the primeval creation of the heaven and the earth in the beginning was the first act of the first day of the 6 days, calling into existence the basic elements of the space-mass-time continuum which constitutes the physical universe. You know, when you bring do a scientific experiment, you start with all the elements of the scientific experiment and put them together and build. And God's explaining to mankind how he did it. And he did it so that mankind could understand. This question was raised. Well, why did God just have it there, right? No time or anything. Well, he communicated it to man, how he did it. Guess what? He's going to do it again. New heavens and a new earth. And he wants mankind to understand that. And mankind's going to measure it by 6 24-hour days, with an evening and a morning. The first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And we'll see with our own eyes and understanding, but probably at an unbelievable pace. But we'll have a great capacity then to see that and understand it. How these things unfolded from the elements, the compounds, the formulation of things, the mountains and the valleys. And I don't know what kind of landmass we're going to have. There's one landmass in oceans, I don't know. Well, it'd be wondrous. But it's going to be within the capacity of our mankind, our advanced resurrection body, eternal body, mankind, to see all this occurring. Wondrous, what a wonderful God. If it just showed up, we'd be amazed at how unbelievable God is. He doesn't need any time at all to create the heavens and the earth. But he wants us to enjoy and within our capacity. See? So, how come? That's the way God inspired the Word of God to be written. Some of these things we don't have to have an answer for. And we can see how unbelievably accurate God is. There are no contradictions. And it perfectly tells a story from cover to cover, from Genesis through Revelation. Genesis 1:1, NASB. Point 3 continued. Next time.